My name is Lauren. I was 27 when my mom told my fiancé I was mentally unstable. I didn't know it at the time. All I knew was that the night of my engagement dinner, the one she insisted on hosting, something shifted, not in the air, in him. The dress I wore that evening had been laid on my bed weeks earlier. Blush pink, cap sleeves, modest, delicate. Nothing too flashy, she had said, smoothing it over with two fingers. You don't want to send the wrong message. It was a phrase she often used. The wrong message. The dinner was supposed to be small, just our parents, a toast, maybe a few polite conversations. But when Ryan and I stepped into the restaurant's private room, it felt like a rehearsal dinner hosted by a corporate sponsor. Nearly 30 guests, polished crystal, assigned seating. Surprise, she chirped, holding a flute of champagne and tilting her head toward Ryan. Isn't this more festive? My dad, a man of quiet transactions and strategic silences, offered Ryan a firm handshake and barely glanced at me. Good to see you, son. Then to me, a nod so slight it might have been aimed at the wall behind me. Ryan laughed, trying to make light of the unexpected crowd. Wow, your mom really knows how to throw a party. She knows how to throw something, I muttered. We hadn't even taken our coats off before my mother sent me toward the restaurant staff with a list of hors d'oeuvres preferences she hadn't bothered to communicate ahead of time. Go make sure they don't use cilantro, she said, brushing invisible lint off my sleeve. You know how your stomach is. It was always like this, compliments that came attached to instructions, smiles that punished, applause with a curfew. By the time I returned, the room had already folded around Ryan. My sister, Danielle, newly single and self-appointed connoisseur of charm, was leaning in close to him with a practiced pout. You clean up nice, she said, touching a sleeve. Did Lauren finally make you ditch the hoodies? She winked at me, like we were co-conspirators. I laughed on cue. That was my role. As dinner began, I noticed that I wasn't seated next to Ryan. My mother had arranged the seating herself. Logistics, she claimed, but somehow Danielle was beside him. She claimed. I was across from my father and one of Mom's former coworkers who kept calling me Lorna. The wine flowed, the jokes got a little sharper, and every time someone made a comment about how calm or centered Ryan seemed, I caught my mother's eye flicking toward me like punctuation. You've really mellowed her, Aunt Janet said, cutting into her lamb. Remember the Christmas she cried over the cranberry sauce? No offense, Lauren. Everyone laughed. Ryan's smile didn't reach his eyes. Then came the toast. My mom stood up with a grace that only made her more dangerous. To my daughter, she began, raising her glass, and the man who saw the potential in her. That line hung there, like a thread waiting to snap. She always said she'd never settle down, that she was too complicated, but then sometimes life sends us someone who calms the waters. She looked straight at Ryan, and I think you're exactly that someone. The clinking of silverware felt louder after that. When I finally caught Ryan alone, out on the sidewalk while everyone else was posing for photos inside, his shoulders were rigid, his expression tight. What's wrong? I asked. He hesitated. Then, your mom said something weird earlier about your history. Forget it. Probably just trying to be funny. But I knew her tone, and I knew then that something had been said I wouldn't be able to undo. Ryan didn't mention it again. Whatever my mother had said to him that night stayed locked behind his careful silence, the kind men use when they don't want to start something, or when they're trying to figure out if it's already too late. The next morning, I found him standing shirtless in front of the hotel bathroom mirror, toothbrush idle in his hand. He wasn't looking at his reflection. He was staring through it. She's intense, he said finally. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulling on my shoes. That's one word. She told me, never mind. I waited. Nothing came. Lauren, he said, did something happen between you two, like years ago? That was the moment something in me folded. I didn't answer right away. I just tied my laces, slowly, deliberately, like I could knot the air back into normal. She's my mother, I said finally. Things have always happened, and none of them ever ended in an apology. We didn't talk much during the ride back. Ryan tapped through his phone while I watched the traffic blur into light patterns on the windshield. When he dropped me off before heading to his shift at the hospital, he kissed my cheek instead of my mouth. That was new. The next day, she texted me. Brunch? Sunday. Just us. It's important. We hadn't had a one-on-one brunch since I was 19, and she tried to convince me to quit my psychology degree because, in her words, Nobody wants a daughter who spends 4 years analyzing feelings they didn't mean to cause. I agreed, mostly out of curiosity. And because I had the distinct sense that I was being studied like a lab rat, and the only way to break the test was to find the examiner's notes. We met at a cafe on the west side of the park, the kind with gold chairs and overpriced croissants. She arrived exactly 1 minute late, which was how she always arrived. Late enough to remind you she didn't rush for anyone, but early enough to make it seem like you were imagining it. She kissed my cheek, ordered green tea, and complimented the waitress's earrings before sitting down. I hope you're not upset about last night, she began. I gave a small, noncommittal smile. Why would I be? Good, she said too quickly. Because everyone had a lovely time, and Ryan is such a breath of fresh air, so grounded. Hmm. She leaned forward, fingers laced. I just want to make sure you're stable going into this marriage. I blinked. Stable? Emotionally, she clarified, like she was reading off a chart. You know, not too reactive. He's a doctor, sweetheart. His life is already chaotic. You want to be his calm, not his chaos. I felt my hands curl beneath the table. Is that what you think I am? Chaos? She tilted her head, that same infuriating tilt she used when I was 16, and she'd found my journal in the laundry. Don't be dramatic. I stared at her for a long time, and I saw it then, the smile. It wasn't hers, it was a version of her smile she wore when she was trying to seem neutral while planning something precise. I'm fine, I said. But thank you for your concern. Her eyes flickered, just once. Back outside, I called Ryan. He didn't answer. I texted. No reply. It took him 5 hours to respond with, sorry, long shift, everything okay? That's when I knew I wasn't imagining it. Something had shifted, and she had moved first. The text came on a Wednesday morning, just after I'd poured my coffee. Ryan's mom would love to meet you. Friday lunch? She picked the place. There was no question mark. I stared at the message longer than I should have. Ryan hadn't been distant exactly, just calibrated. Like someone who'd been told to expect turbulence. I responded with, of course, looking forward to it. He replied with a thumbs up emoji. That Friday, I arrived 5 minutes early. The restaurant, a quiet French bistro tucked between a stationery shop and a tailor's storefront, was all white tablecloths and fresh lilies. A little too precise. She was already there. Samantha Walker, blonde bob, pearl studs, and the kind of posture that meant Pilates at sunrise and therapy she never admitted to. Lauren, she said warmly, standing. So glad you came. We shook hands. Her grip was cool and controlled, not weak, just weighted. Ryan's told me so much about you, she said, gesturing to the seat across from her. Good things, I hope. She laughed gently. Mostly. There was no menu. She'd pre-ordered. You don't mind fish, do you? She asked. No, I said, but I did. The waiter poured sparkling water. No wine. Not for lunch. Not here. Samantha folded her napkin carefully. So, tell me, how are you managing everything? The engagement, your work, the attention? The attention? It's been a lot, I said cautiously. But good. I like being busy. Mm-hmm. She nodded, eyes studying me like a medical chart. Ryan's always been drawn to people with depth, but depth can sometimes mean unpredictability. There it was, barely hidden. I kept my smile in place. I think stability can exist with complexity. They're not mutually exclusive. She tilted her head slightly. Karen mentioned you've had some challenges. The air snapped colder. Did she? Samantha sipped her water. Only that you've overcome quite a bit, and that sometimes emotions run high in your family. My blood went hot. Karen says many things, I replied. Most of them about herself. She didn't flinch, she just reached for her fork. Ryan's very kind, she said. He wants to believe the best in people, especially women. He's always tried to fix things. The implication wasn't even subtle. I'm not broken, I said flatly. She looked up then, full eye contact. I hope that's true. Lunch arrived. Sea bass, wild rice, lemon vinaigrette. I barely touched it. When the check came, which she paid for without asking, she leaned in slightly. We all want what's best for Ryan, and you seem very bright. I just hope you're being honest with yourself. And with him. I walked out of that restaurant with one thought screaming in my mind. She's already made up her mind about me, and my mother helped write the story. That night, Ryan texted, "Thanks for meeting her. She said you were poised." Poised? Like I was a debutante or a contestant. I stared at my phone for a long time before replying. Did she say anything else? He never responded. And the next morning, my mother sent me a photo. Her and Samantha, clinking glasses. Caption, just a lovely catch up. So much love for our future girl. She was already painting the walls of the narrative, and I hadn't even seen the blueprints. I hadn't been to Dr. Feldman's office in nearly a decade. The waiting room hadn't changed. Same plastic chairs, same fish tank with exactly 3 tetras and a plastic castle. Same chipped laminate countertop with a bell that nobody used because Meredith, the receptionist, always appeared before you even raised your hand. "Lauren," she said, glancing up from the computer. "It's been a while." "I know. Sorry for the last-minute request." "Not at all. He's free now if you are." Dr. Feldman was already standing in the doorway when I turned around. "Lauren, it's good to see you." He looked exactly the same. Corduroy jacket, wireframe glasses, expression like he was perpetually squinting through fog only he could see. We stepped into the small consultation room. The walls still had faded posters about seasonal depression and ADHD in adolescence. The exam table was covered in crinkled paper. "I just wanted to look at something," I said. "From a long time ago." He raised a brow. "Records?" I nodded. "Around when I was 17, 18, I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to." He studied me for a moment. "All right, give me a second." He disappeared down the hall. I sat on the edge of the table, listening to the buzz of the overhead lights, the hum of something old, working too hard to stay alive. 10 minutes later, he returned with a thin manila folder in his hand. "Most of it's digitized now," he said, "but you slipped through the cracks. Lucky for you, some of us still believe in paper." He handed it over. "You can take a few minutes here. I'll give you some privacy." When he left, I opened it slowly. The pages were photocopies. Notes scrawled in his old, uneven handwriting. Appointments, observations, prescriptions I barely remembered. But one note, one line from a session I barely recalled, felt like ice against my skin. Patient described persistent feelings of inadequacy stemming from maternal feedback. Mother present at session, frequently redirected conversation back to herself. And just below that, circled twice in red pen, suggested follow-up denied by parent. I kept flipping. There was a note from another session, one I attended alone. I must have been 19. Expressed concern that relationship with mother is conditional on obedience. Patient fears being perceived as unstable or emotional. Emphasized desire for autonomy. And then, 3 pages later, something I had never seen, never heard mentioned, a letter. Typed, clean, with her name signed at the bottom in perfect cursive, to Dr. Feldman. "Lauren is very sensitive and often misinterprets family dynamics. We're concerned that therapy may encourage ruminations that are unhelpful to her long-term development. Please understand we are choosing not to continue sessions." I couldn't breathe for a second. I read it again, then again. I had always remembered her pulling me from therapy, but I thought it was about insurance, about money. It wasn't. It was about control. The door creaked. Dr. Feldman peeked inside. "You all right?" I nodded, but I wasn't. Did my mother ever call you?" "After I left?" I asked. He hesitated. "She did. A few times, mostly around college, expressing concern, but I can't disclose more than that." I understood, but I didn't need details. I already knew the pattern. She'd been curating my story for years, even when I thought it was mine to tell. I walked out of that office feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not sadness, not confusion, rage. It started with a voicemail. I was in the car, parked outside a dry cleaner, hands still gripping the steering wheel even though the engine was off. I hadn't moved for nearly 20 minutes, just staring at the dashboard, replaying the words from Dr. Feldman's office over and over in my mind. When the phone buzzed, I didn't even glance at the screen. I let it go to voicemail, but as soon as I heard the voice, soft, slightly breathless, unmistakably familiar, I fumbled to hit play. "Hey Lauren, it's Emily. I know it's been forever, but I saw something weird and I thought maybe I should check in. It's probably nothing, but call me, okay?" Emily had been my freshman year roommate. We hadn't spoken in years, not out of malice, just the slow erosion of proximity. I transferred off campus after sophomore year. She'd studied abroad in Rome. Life had pulled the thread loose. But I called her back. She picked up instantly. "Lauren, Hey, I got your message. What's going on? There was a pause. Then I ran into your old RA at a networking thing. Sarah, remember her? I nodded, even though Emily couldn't see me. Yeah, tall, always wore cardigans. What about her? She mentioned you, asked if you were doing okay now. It caught me off guard. I said, sure, why wouldn't she be? And then Sarah got all weird and mumbled something about freshman year being rough for you emotionally. I blinked. I never talked to Sarah about anything, not like that. I know, that's why it felt strange. Like rehearsed, like she'd heard it somewhere else. The silence between us was heavy. And then, Emily continued, I remembered something. Do you remember that month you got called into student counseling for those weekly check ins? I felt my stomach turn. They said it was routine, that they just wanted to make sure I was adjusting well. I said slowly. Except no one else on our floor was getting called in, just you. A memory surfaced. Me sitting on a blue vinyl couch while a counselor asked gently worded questions about my stress levels, my academic workload, my moods. At the time, it had felt invasive but harmless. Lauren, Emily said carefully, did your parents know anyone at the school? My mom sat on the parent advisory board that year, I murmured. Of course she had. I remembered the glossy newsletter with her picture under a quote about campus wellness. She mentioned something about ensuring student resilience. Called herself a parental advocate, I added, voice flat. Emily exhaled sharply. You think she flagged you without you knowing? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I just thought you should know, she said, because something felt off, and I didn't want to sit with it alone. After we hung up, I stared out the windshield for a long time. Freshman year had been hard. I'd been homesick, overwhelmed, trying to prove myself in a program that was already stacked with legacy admissions and pressure. But I'd gotten through it. I'd thought I'd done it on my own terms. Now I wasn't sure if those terms had ever been mine. I checked my call log. Ryan still hadn't reached out since our last short exchange. 4 days, not even a thinking of you. I opened our message thread, scrolled up, read it like a timeline, slowly watched the shift, from warmth to politeness, from interest to management. And then I saw it. A text from 2 months ago I hadn't noticed the subtext of then. Had brunch with your mom. She said you've come a long way. I had thought it was a compliment. Now I realized it was an evaluation. It was a Sunday, late afternoon, the kind of hour that makes everything look softer, even if nothing feels it. I was in the middle of folding laundry when the knock came. 3 taps. Not hurried, not tentative, familiar. I didn't need to check the peephole. When I opened the door, Ryan was standing there. No flowers, no smile, just him in that same charcoal hoodie he wore the first time we kissed, holding his phone like a shield. Hey, he said, hey. My voice cracked without permission. Can I come in? I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, glancing around like he'd never been here before, like everything inside this apartment might have changed since the last time. And in some ways, it had. I gestured toward the kitchen counter. Coffee? He shook his head. I won't be long. The air between us thickened. Then he spoke. Your mom reached out again. Of course she did. She said she was worried that you might be struggling. I didn't respond. I didn't breathe. She told me there's a history, that it comes in waves, that you sometimes rewrite things when you feel overwhelmed. I turned away. My hands gripped the counter. She said you used to disappear emotionally, that you'd create stories to protect yourself. The world tilted. I faced him. Do you believe her? He looked down. I don't know. I laughed, just once. It came out like a gasp. Ryan, look at me. He didn't. Look at me, I repeated. Finally, he did. I'm not a story someone made up. I'm not broken, and I'm not confused about what happened in that house. His silence felt like a slap. She's rewriting me, I said, voice rising. She's always rewritten me since I was a kid, but I didn't think you'd be the one who'd let her. He exhaled sharply, pacing toward the window. I don't want to be in the middle, he muttered. You're not in the middle, I snapped. You've picked a side, and it's not mine. He ran a hand through his hair. I needed to hear your side too, he said weakly. My laugh this time was colder. You already did, for months, in every conversation, every time I told you how I felt around her. Every time I said she twists things, he sat down at the edge of the couch, shoulders slumped, eyes clouded. I watched him for a long time. Then I said something I never thought I would. Do you think I'm unstable? He didn't answer, and that silence told me everything. He stood, slowly, like someone walking away from a wreckage they hadn't expected to witness up close. I should go, he said quietly. I didn't stop him. He paused at the door. I'm not saying I believe everything she said, he offered like that was some kind of gift. But you believe enough, I whispered, and then he left. The moment the door closed behind him, my body folded to the floor like paper. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just stared at the door and whispered to the empty room. She finally did it. She'd turned the man I loved into a question mark. The day after Ryan left, I didn't get out of bed. I didn't shower, I didn't eat. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling like it might spell out an answer in the shadows. But grief never writes you a map. You have to go digging in the ruins yourself. That evening, I opened my laptop. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe an old email thread, a photo, anything to remind myself that what I felt had been real. That Ryan hadn't always looked at me like I was a mirror with a crack only he could see. But instead, I found something else. My old phone backups. I hadn't thought about them in years. A sync folder buried under layers of apps marked with the name of a device I hadn't used since grad school. The one I'd given up after my mother called it too emotional to keep track of. Curious, I opened it. Inside were a dozen audio files. Voice memos, the first few were ordinary. Shopping lists, half-baked therapy notes I'd never shared. But then I hit play on one. It started mid-conversation, muffled, like I'd hit record by accident during a call. Just keep in mind, my mother's voice said crisply, Lauren has always been dramatic. A pause, the rustle of paper. You know how she is with men, she gets attached too quickly, then spirals. Another pause. I'm only telling you this because you care about her, and I don't want you walking into something blind. My heart stopped. I scrubbed through the recording, listening to fragments I couldn't place. Her tone was smooth, calm the way you'd speak to a doctor before a diagnosis. Clinical. Measured, like I was a condition, not a daughter. Another memo played automatically. I recognized the time. It had been the week Ryan and I had our first real fight. She's not dangerous, my mother said softly, almost laughing. Just volatile, emotional, you'll learn to manage it. I slammed the laptop shut. Managed? I sat in the dark for what felt like hours, pulse thudding in my ears. Then I remembered something. Ryan's phone. Once, months ago, he'd shown me how he organized his messages. Labeled threads, archived chats. He'd said he did it for work, to keep patients' families straight. I grabbed my phone and opened the cloud link he'd shared months earlier for a vacation we never took. He hadn't revoked access. Inside was a folder labeled Family Reference. One thread, Karen Notes. My stomach turned. Screenshots. One was from the night of our engagement dinner. Karen, if she seems withdrawn tonight, don't take it personally. Stress brings back the moods. Another, Karen, her therapist in college said she had a tendency to reframe events. She calls it perspective. I call it avoidance. There were 6 messages like that. Maybe more, I didn't read the rest. I just stared at the screen until the letters blurred. She hadn't just manipulated the narrative, she'd preloaded it. She'd built a whole mythology and handed Ryan the script months ago. And I'd played my part perfectly, unaware that the curtain had already dropped before the second act began. Danielle answered on the second ring. I need to see you, I said. Now. There was a pause. Then, is this about Mom? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. We met at a cafe halfway between her office and the city library. Neutral ground. Wide windows, crowded tables, no place for screaming or lying. She showed up in a navy blazer and sunglasses too big for a cloudy day. You look like you're hiding from paparazzi, I muttered. Just trying not to look like the sister of a headline. I didn't sit. I pulled my phone out, placed it on the table between us, and hit play. The voice memo filled the space between our coffees. My mother's voice, calm and clipped. Lauren has always been dramatic. You know how she is with men? Danielle's face didn't change, not a flicker. When it ended, I leaned in. Tell me you didn't know. She stirred her drink once, twice, like she was buying time. Then she looked up. I knew she'd said things. I didn't know you had proof. I sat slowly. What did she tell you? Danielle's laugh was soft, bitter. That you were fragile, that you twisted things to protect your ego, that you played the victim when you didn't get your way. Did you believe her? I didn't believe anyone. I just stopped asking questions. She looked down, eyes unfocused. You think it's easier if you pretend not to hear the knife go in. You think if I just stay quiet, maybe she won't aim it at me next. I stared. So she does it to you too? Danielle snorted. Not the same way. I play along. I mirror her. She thinks that's loyalty. She paused. But it's just survival. My chest tightened. Why didn't you warn me? Because I wanted her to love me. The words fell out like a confession. And I thought maybe if I didn't get in the way, she'd finally stop comparing us. I swallowed hard. She never compared us. Danielle nodded. Exactly. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I asked the question that had been clawing at me since the messages. Did she ever talk to Ryan directly, before the dinner? Danielle hesitated. Yes. I felt something crack under my ribs. She pulled him aside at a fundraiser, she said. I saw it, I didn't hear what was said, but afterward he looked different. He left early. That had been 2 weeks before he proposed. She started early, I said under my breath. She laid the groundwork like a campaign. Danielle exhaled slowly. That's what she does. She tells you how the story ends before you realize it's been written. I looked at her. Then it's time I rewrote it. She blinked. What does that mean? It means I'm not playing defense anymore. Her eyes flickered to the phone. You're going to show him? I nodded. And everyone else she's manipulated. Ryan's just the beginning. Danielle reached across the table and rested a hand over mine. Do what she never expected, she said quietly. What's that? Tell the truth, where people can hear it. I booked the table at the Green Terrace Bistro, the same place where we'd once celebrated Ryan's residency match. The same table, in fact. Corner booth near the window, where you could watch the city flicker alive one light at a time. I told him I wanted to talk. In person, no messages. No phone calls. He agreed, hesitantly, but he agreed. I arrived early, voice memos saved to my phone, a backup file in the cloud, a folder printed and waiting in my bag. My hands didn't shake. I thought they might, but they didn't. I sat there, spine straight, watching the door. At exactly 7:03 it opened. But it wasn't Ryan who walked through. It was my mother. She wore navy and cream, her signature elegant contrast, she once called it. She looked directly at me like this was her table, her plan, her script. She sat down without asking. I thought you might pull something like this, she said calmly. So I came instead. My stomach twisted. You intercepted the message? He's not coming, Lauren. My mouth went dry. What did you say to him? She folded her napkin with deliberate grace. I reminded him of a few things, of how hard he's worked, how unpredictable you've been lately, how you've been collecting evidence. You mean the truth? She leaned in. No, sweetheart, I mean paranoia. My jaw clenched. I have recordings. Of course you do, she said, not missing a beat. But context, Lauren, that's everything. And the context is, you've always needed someone to blame. I stared at her, pulse pounding. You told him I was unstable. I told him you were hurting, she said softly. Which is true. You sabotaged my relationship. I protected it, she whispered. From you. The rage that rose in me wasn't loud, it was cold, like black ice spreading under skin. You don't get to rewrite me anymore, I said. I have your voice, your words. You have fragments, she replied, gently smoothing her sleeve. But people don't listen to tapes, they listen to tone, and I'm very good at tone. She smiled. It was the smile of a woman who'd won battles behind closed doors her whole life, whose weapons had never needed to be seen to be deadly. But I wasn't the same girl she used to gaslight into silence. Not anymore. You're right, I said quietly. People listen to tone. I pulled out my phone, pressed play. The restaurant wasn't loud, just the clinking of forks and soft conversation, but her voice cut through it like a scalpel. Just keep in mind, Lauren has always been dramatic. She went still. I let it run. I didn't care who heard. When it ended, I looked her in the eye. That's what you sound like when you're not performing. Her hands stayed folded, but her lips tightened just a little. Enough. You'll only humiliate yourself, she said. I shrugged. Better than disappearing? She stood then, composed, controlled, but her eyes betrayed something I'd never seen before. Fear. She leaned in close. This will destroy your future. No, I whispered. It'll protect it. She walked out. And 5 minutes later, Ryan texted, Are you okay? I need to see you. We met the next morning in the courtyard behind his building. It was quiet, cold, just enough wind to make the leaves whisper across the concrete. He looked tired. His eyes were red-rimmed, like he hadn't slept. His jacket was unzipped. "I wasn't sure you'd come," I said. He nodded. "I wasn't either." I studied him, the way his shoulders sagged, how his fingers tapped against his thigh like they were trying to keep rhythm with a heartbeat he no longer trusted. He motioned toward the bench. We sat. "I saw her," I said, "last night." "I know," I turned to him, startled. "You do?" "She texted me when she left, said you were spiraling again, said she tried to calm you down." I almost laughed. "Calm me down?" "She showed up in your place and tried to rewrite the ending." He looked away. I didn't respond, he said. I didn't know what to think, but then I listened. My pulse kicked. "You did?" He nodded. "Danielle sent me the file." For a second, all the noise in my brain stopped. She said if I wanted to know the truth, I needed to hear it from the source. And the source wasn't your mom. I watched his hands. They were shaking. "I believed her," he said quietly. "I let her convince me that doubt was love, that suspicion was protection." "It's not," I said. "It's erosion." He nodded again. There was silence between us, not sharp, not cold, just heavy. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small white envelope. "She sent this to my parents last week, before everything. My mom only told me last night." He handed it to me. Inside was a single sheet, typed, signed, just like the letter she'd sent to my therapist years ago. "We have growing concerns about Lauren's mental stability. We ask that you be cautious with further engagement. As her family, we've seen patterns emerge again and again." My throat closed. "She never stopped," I whispered. "She doesn't know how to stop," he replied. We sat there for a long time. Then behind us, a voice. "Lauren." We both turned. It was her, Karen. She stood under the awning near the edge of the building, sunglasses on, her mouth set in that familiar line of practiced poise. "You shouldn't be here," I said. "I came to check on you." Ryan stood. "You came to control the aftermath." Karen didn't flinch. "I'm your mother. I've earned the right to be concerned." "No," I said, rising beside him. "You've earned the right to be ignored." I stepped forward, closing the distance. "I know everything now," I said softly. "About the letters, the messages, the meetings. You didn't protect me, you packaged me." Her lips pressed into a hard line. "I did what I had to." "To what?" I snapped. "Keep the story neat? Keep me digestible for your image?" She didn't answer. Ryan stepped between us. "You need to leave," he said. "Now." Karen looked at him, and for the first time she looked small, not broken, but cornered. "I warned you both," she said. "Truth has consequences." "So do lies," I said, "and yours are done growing." She left without another word. We didn't speak for a minute. Then Ryan turned to me. "She's not done." "I know." He reached for my hand, but neither am I. The invitation came 2 days later, a family luncheon, hosted at Aunt Margaret's estate in Montclair. Casual, according to the card, but Margaret didn't know how to breathe without a centerpiece. Karen had planned it. Of course she had. I recognized the strategy. Gather the extended family, wrap it in silk and hors d'oeuvres, and slowly poison the room with implication. She was building a defense not with facts, but with feelings. And if I didn't show up, I'd be painted as unstable again, reclusive, ashamed, hiding. So I showed up, but I didn't go alone. Ryan walked beside me up the driveway, his hand steady at my back. Danielle trailed just behind, her eyes scanning the crowd like a bodyguard at a red carpet event. We were a formation now, not perfect, not polished, but aligned. Margaret opened the door with the tight smile of someone who hadn't expected me to come. "Oh," she said. "Lauren." I kissed her cheek before she could adjust her tone. "Lovely to see you, Aunt Mags. Is Mom inside?" She hesitated. "She's with the others, out by the terrace." Perfect. The house smelled like lemon polish and tension. I moved through it like a woman with a purpose, because I was. When we reached the terrace, Karen was mid-laugh with 3 of our cousins. She turned as she sensed us approach, and her smile died. "Lauren," she said, "what a surprise." I smiled. "No, it's not." Around us, heads turned, conversations faltered. I stepped forward. "Since we're all here, why don't we have a little clarity?" Karen's face didn't move, but her eyes darted. To Margaret, to my father, to the cousins still holding champagne flutes halfway to their lips. "I think you're making a scene," she said evenly. "No," I replied. "You made a scene. I'm just narrating the truth." I pulled my phone from my coat, opened the voice memo app, but I didn't hit play. Instead, I looked at my father. "Did you know she sent letters about me?" He blinked. "What letters?" "To Ryan's parents, to my therapist, to our college advisor. About my emotional state, about how I needed to be managed." Whispers broke out like static. My mother's voice sharpened. "Lauren, that's enough." I turned to her. "Is it, or are you just scared someone might finally stop nodding along?" A pause. Then I turned to the crowd. "For years, she's been controlling how you see me, who you think I am. She told people I was unstable, manipulative, that I couldn't be trusted." I held up my phone. "But this is her voice, her real voice. And I think it's time everyone hears it." Karen stepped forward, eyes wild for the first time. "You're humiliating yourself," she hissed. "They'll never believe you." I tilted my head. "Then why are you shaking?" I hit play. "Lauren has always been dramatic." The words filled the terrace like a storm. Clear, cold, I let it run 30 seconds before pausing. Karen's mouth opened, and then closed. Silence. Then Danielle stepped forward. "She's telling the truth. I watched it happen for years." And I said nothing. My father looked between us. Me, Karen, Danielle, like seeing ghosts come to life. "I didn't know," he said softly. "No," I replied. "You didn't want to." No one moved for a long time. The audio still echoed in the silence, not physically, but in the way everyone suddenly avoided eye contact, shifting their weight, sipping drinks with trembling fingers. Karen stood motionless. Aunt Margaret's eyes darted toward her, then toward me. She said nothing. Neither did Uncle Dan or the cousins. Even my father, usually a man of backpedals and polite retreat, didn't utter a word. Ryan reached for my hand. I let him. And then, finally, Karen turned on her heel and walked back into the house. Not a word. No denial, no apology, just retreat. Danielle followed her. I didn't go after them. I stayed where I was, letting the silence do what it was supposed to. Linger, settle, infect. Letting them sit with the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the version of me they'd politely dismissed all these years was the real one. And maybe the one they trusted, the curated, powdered matriarch, had been something else entirely. 20 minutes later, Margaret clinked her glass and awkwardly declared dessert. People shuffled inside like they were evacuating a fault line. Ryan squeezed my hand. "You did what no one else could." "I did what no one else would," I replied. He nodded. Then Danielle reappeared. "She wants to talk," she said. "Karen?" "She says she wants to fix this." I almost laughed. "She can't fix this," I said. "It's not a spilled drink," but I followed her back inside. Karen was seated in the den, same room where we'd once watched family videos on a projector screen she insisted made things feel cinematic. She looked up, pale, composed. "Sit," she said. I remained standing. She folded her hands. "I didn't expect you to play it." "You didn't expect me to find it," I corrected. She exhaled. "It wasn't meant for destruction." "It was never meant to be discovered." Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, as if checking whether the walls had ears. "You embarrassed me." I stepped forward. "You dismantled me." Her lips pressed together. "You always think everything is about control." I didn't blink. "Because with you, it always is." She stood then, slowly. "I didn't do this to hurt you." "No, you did it to protect yourself, to protect your version of me, the manageable one." Her voice dropped. "I was afraid of what would happen if people saw the real you." That struck deeper than I expected. "And what's the real me, Karen? The one who refuses to be edited?" She stepped closer. "The one who reminds me too much of myself." For a moment, the room was carved out of static. "I told myself I was preparing you for the world," she said. "But really, I was preparing the world to pity you." And there it was, the truth, not clean, not rehearsed, ugly, raw. "Why?" I whispered. "Because it made me feel needed." I stared at her for a long time. Then I said, "I'm done being needed like that." Karen didn't cry. She never had. But something broke behind her eyes. I turned to leave. She called out, "What will you tell them now?" I paused. The truth, in full. And this time, I wouldn't be interrupted. Karen had one last card to play. Her annual charity gala, the Hearts and Homes fundraiser, was her pride. A ballroom rented at the Muirfield Club, rows of pale gold chairs, strings of white orchids along every table. The same MC every year, the same faux humble speech about community, compassion, and quiet leadership. It wasn't about charity, it never had been, it was about image. And this year, the invitation was personal. It came hand-delivered. Heavy cream cardstock, gold trim, my name embossed at the top. Not Lauren plus guest, just Lauren. The message was clear. She was daring me to show up. So I did. I wore black, sleek, clean, no embellishment, no apology. Danielle stood beside me in burgundy, Ryan just behind us, quiet but steady. As we entered the ballroom, every head turned. Karen stood near the stage, mid-conversation with a donor, but I saw her pause when she noticed us. I didn't look away. The evening unfolded in a whirl of speeches and slow, polite applause. Waiters glided past with trays of champagne and crab cakes. A pianist played something forgettable. The lights dimmed to a soft gold glow. Then it was her turn. Karen stepped up to the podium. She spoke about resilience, about emotional clarity and the importance of family through hardship. I felt Ryan stiffen beside me. Danielle's grip tightened on her glass. Karen's voice was smooth, practiced, almost warm. Then she said it. This year, I'd like to dedicate this evening to my daughters. Both unique, both courageous. And one of them, she glanced toward me, has shown tremendous growth. She's teaching all of us the value of speaking up, even when it's hard to hear. A smattering of applause followed. I stood, walked toward the back of the room, and turned. I'd like to say something. The mic was still warm when I touched it. Karen didn't stop me. Some of you know me. Some of you think you do. My voice rang clear across the marble and glass. For years, I let others tell my story. I let it be edited, softened, sanitized. I was described as fragile, difficult, even unstable. I turned my gaze directly to Karen. None of it was true, but it was convenient. I paused. There are recordings, letters, messages, not whispers, not memories, proof. The crowd shifted uneasily. I was rewritten by someone who claimed to love me. And when I tried to claim my voice, I was told I was making a scene. I scanned the room. Well, here it is. My scene, my voice. I held up my phone. I brought the evidence tonight. I could play it, but I won't. Karen's eyes widened slightly. Because I'm not here to humiliate, I'm here to reclaim. I stepped back. Applause didn't erupt. Not at first, but then someone stood. Aunt Margaret, then Ryan, then Danielle, and then, one by one, the room followed. Karen didn't clap. She didn't move. She just stood there, porcelain still, watching as her world realigned without her. I handed the mic back to the MC and walked off stage. Ryan met me in the wings. You didn't need to play it, he said. I already lived it, I replied. The high from the gala didn't last 24 hours. The next morning, I woke up to a message from my landlord, effective immediately, lease terminated, no warning, no explanation, just a notice. I thought it was a mistake, a clerical mix-up, some glitch in the system, until I read the fine print. Complaints filed citing concern over emotional volatility and tenant stability. My blood ran cold. I called Ryan. I know, he said. I just saw it. My hospital privileges are under review. What? I gasped. He exhaled. A complaint was filed anonymously about professional boundaries, about you. The silence stretched like wire. She's hitting back, I whispered. He didn't argue. Danielle called 5 minutes later. Her bank account had been frozen pending identity verification. A security hold, she was told, routine, except it wasn't, because it had happened to all of us. One by one, the 3 people who stood beside me on that stage. Karen wasn't making a scene. She was burning the theater down, and it was working. I sat in my empty apartment, a box half packed with books beside me, and stared at the wall. She won't stop, I said aloud. Not until she's erased every version of me that doesn't bow. Ryan paced. We'll go public, real public, media, podcast, whatever it takes. Danielle shook her head. She'll spin it. She'll say we're punishing her for parenting. She's not parenting, I snapped. She's punishing. I grabbed my laptop, opened the archive folder, pulled every file, every note, every message. This isn't about payback, I said. It's about severance. I booked the room that afternoon. A conference hall in the community center. Just 20 chairs, 1 mic, 1 screen, no luxury, no catering, just facts. I sent one invitation to Karen, and I told her what was coming. I told her I'd read the letter aloud. I'd play the recordings. I'd print the messages. And I'd give them to anyone who wanted them. She responded within the hour. Don't do this. It's not too late to correct course. Correct course? I almost laughed. I didn't reply, but I knew she'd show. And when she did, she wouldn't come empty-handed. Sure enough, she arrived 10 minutes early. Perfectly pressed blouse, minimal makeup, a pearl brooch shaped like a dove. She came alone. I see you're committed, she said. No more edits? I replied. She tilted her head. Then let me give you something first. She handed me an envelope. I opened it. It wasn't a letter. It was a signed affidavit from Dr. Halverson, my college therapist. I was encouraged by a third party to document emotional concerns in a student without clear basis. My hands trembled. I kept it, she said softly, for leverage. Why give it to me now? I asked. Because I lost, she whispered. And for the first time, I believed she knew it. She turned and walked out, and I stood there, holding the paper that proved everything. Not for validation, not for applause, but for closure. I held the affidavit in my hands for almost a full minute after she left. Not because I doubted it, not because I needed time to read it, because I knew what it meant. She had never believed she would lose. She'd built her legacy on the assumption that I would stay quiet, stay ashamed, stay shaped by her shadow. And now she had handed me the matchbook, so I lit the fuse. That night, I opened the conference hall door to 16 people. Not the press, not lawyers, not even extended family. Just faces that had known me in fragments, childhood teachers, college friends, an old mentor, the neighbor who'd once taken in our dog when my mom forgot to come home. I greeted each of them, then I stepped to the mic. I'm not here to destroy a woman, I began. I'm here to stop one from erasing me. I told the story, not the dramatic version, not the edited highlights, the real one. I played the recordings. I passed out copies of the letter. I read Dr. Halverson's affidavit aloud. I showed the texts, the pattern, the framework of manipulations so many of them had witnessed in smaller ways but never connected. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for pity. I just told the truth. Fully. Publicly. Without flinching. When I finished, no one clapped. It wasn't that kind of room, but they stood. One by one, not for performance, for recognition. I left the conference center lighter than I'd ever felt. Ryan was waiting outside, leaning on the hood of his car like it was instinct to protect my space. She came to watch, he said. Didn't enter, stayed in the parking lot. I nodded. That's her theater now. She left before you finished. I expected nothing less. He opened the passenger door for me. I'm not going home, I said. He smiled. Good, because I had one last place to go. An hour later, I stood at the county clerk's office, paperwork in hand. A name change, not a legal one, a symbolic one. I wasn't removing Anderson because it belonged to her. I was choosing a name that belonged to me. My middle name, reclaimed. No more initials, no more shrinking. Lauren Grace. Grace wasn't who I used to be. It was who I'd fought to become. The clerk asked, "Do you have any preferred signature format?" Yes, I said. Every letter, no abbreviations, no silence. When I stepped outside, the wind caught my hair and lifted it off my shoulders. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because for the first time in my life, I was no longer walking away from anything. I was walking fully into myself, and she would never, ever write me again.